Hello everyone, you are watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and this is the daily summary of combat operations from the Ukrainian front. Yesterday, Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov made a special statement, reaffirming that Russia's territorial demands are well known, and they are not subject to change. In addition, Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov confirmed exactly the same thing. This was clearly a direct response to recent leaks in the Western press, claiming that Russia was supposedly ready to give up parts of the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions in exchange for full control over Donetsk. Friends, please give me a moment of your attention. As always, I kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel if you've been watching my videos for some time but haven't subscribed yet. Your subscription helps this channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. Let's continue. So, the battles on the front line continue, and we continue to analyze the situation together. Yesterday could rightfully be called a day of attacks. Russian forces launched a very powerful offensive on one section of the front and achieved tangible results. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine also carried out an attack using armored vehicles on another direction. We will talk about that as well. But let's begin with the Russian assault. The attack was launched on what is called a dead section of the Zaporizhzhia region. The goal was to break through the Ukrainian defensive line and improve positions, specifically in the Orikhiv sector. Why do I call it dead? Because in recent months, there have been practically no changes along this stretch of the front line. The reasons are obvious: a strong defensive line in front of the city, open terrain with no cover, and hundreds of drones constantly patrolling the sky. However, the plan to capture the city of Orikhiv has not been cancelled, meaning the local command has been ordered not to stay idle, but to push forward and improve positions. Yesterday, a massive assault was attempted from 3 directions simultaneously. The first target was Molodetske, the second, the line near Novodanilivka, and the third, the line near Novoandriivka. Footage of the Russian column's attack has already appeared online, and I will show it to you. Keep in mind, though, that the video was filmed from the Ukrainian side. So what can be seen in those videos? A large number of armored vehicles were involved. Not only infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers, but also tanks. It is also visible that some of the vehicles were hit and burned. But in this particular area, that is inevitable. The terrain is completely open, almost no forest lines, only fields. How else can you act here? If infantry goes on foot, Ukrainian drone operators will simply pick them off one by one, using FPV drones, and no one would reach the target. Casualties would be enormous. So even if a military genius were commanding this sector, the vehicles would still be lost. The Russian commanders on the ground understood perfectly well that they were sending vehicles on a one-way mission. The goal wasn't to preserve the equipment, but to use it to transport troops as close to the target as possible and let them dismount and establish a foothold. And on 2 out of the 3 assault directions, the Russian army achieved success. From the outskirts of Molodetske, they managed to break through straight into the center of the village. The advance amounted to more than 3 kilometers, which is a very strong result. As you can see from the map, the village is quite large. For a long time, the Russian army couldn't make any progress there at all, and suddenly, a breakthrough right into the center for more than 3 kilometers. But that wasn't the only success. There's another achievement, which was personally confirmed to me by a fighter from that sector. But first, let's summarize the results so far. In Molodetske, Russian troops managed to break through to the center of the village, and the infantry dismounted. Whether they managed to hold their ground will become clear in the coming days, because getting to the center is one thing, but holding it is another. We will be closely monitoring the Orikhiv direction over the next 48 hours. The second achievement, according to the fighter, is that the Russian army not only advanced in Molodetske, but also managed to secure positions in Novodanilivka. This village is strategically important because the distance between Novodanilivka and the city of Orikhiv is only about 750 meters. Capturing it would allow Russian forces to exert direct pressure on Orikhiv itself. For now, this is a matter of future progress. The current information suggests that troops reached the southern outskirts of the village. Whether they will manage to hold and expand that success, we'll see in the coming days. They had already entered Novodanilivka before, but couldn't consolidate and had to withdraw. Let's see how it plays out this time. The third direction, Nesterianka Novo-Andreyivka, did not yield any visible results. It seems that the line of contact there has not shifted, and Russian troops have not entered Novo-Andreyivka. Though perhaps the information just hasn't surfaced yet. That can happen. In summary, the troops did extremely hard work and managed to move the front line forward on a sector that had been stagnant for months. The breakthrough into the center of Molodetske is especially impressive. The overall plan of the attack is tactically sound, advancing from 3 directions at once, targeting the villages that form the Ukrainian defensive ring, preventing direct combat for Orikhiv, Molodetske, Novodanilivka, and Novo-Andreyivka. These are the defensive lines of the armed forces of Ukraine. If Russian forces seize them, Orikhiv will be encircled from the south, east, and west. But the terrain is very difficult, so despite these successes, I personally remain cautious rather than optimistic. We'll keep watching. Moving on. Yesterday, there were also reports that fighters from the Vostok group crossed the Yancha River at another point and entered the outskirts of Persha-Travneva. However, nothing has been marked on the maps yet, and that's understandable. The cartographers are waiting for reliable confirmation. Even though footage appeared showing a flag, it's too early to say they've secured or fully captured the village. It's better to wait for verified information. Still, if it turns out that this was not a small reconnaissance group but a full-scale assault unit, and if they manage to take Persha-Travnev under control in the coming days, that would significantly increase pressure on Uspenivka from the north. And Uspenivka is a key defensive hub for Ukrainian forces across that entire sector. Its fall would mark the beginning of a full-scale offensive toward Huliaipol. Next, let's move on. Every day, the Russian army takes new settlements under control, and yesterday was no exception. Troops from the center group completed the capture of the village of Molodetske, located near the border of Dnipropetrovsk region. The southern part of the village, beyond the railway line, had been taken a few weeks ago, and now they have completed the capture of the main northern section. What's next? Beyond lies Dnipropetrovsk region and the direction toward the town of Mezhova. From the current positions to Mezhova, the distance is about 13.5 kilometers. It's still far, but by spring they will likely reach it. Even now, Russian assault units have started operations near Novopodhorodne, a movement precisely toward Mezhova. Now to Pokrovsk. The situation for the armed forces of Ukraine there is dire, with no prospects for improvement. They will not be able to save the city. Both Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad are expected to fall within the next 2 months. The only question is whether Ukrainian forces will manage to withdraw their main troops or end up encircled, because the exit corridor is narrowing literally every day. 6 days ago, the corridor was about 8 kilometers wide. Now it's about 5.5. Just a couple more kilometers. And that's it. It's hard to imagine how they could escape through such a narrow gap. Fighting is already taking place in the center of Pokrovsk, and Ukrainian forces are retreating. The outlook for the Russian army here is quite favorable. Almost half of the city is already under Russian control, and the pace of advance inside the city is accelerating. It's very possible that by early December, this massive pocket will be completely cleared and eliminated. Soon, Pokrovsk will drain all remaining Ukrainian reserves, their defenses will collapse, and the entire front line in this area will crumble. Zelensky reportedly demanded once again that General Syrskyi throw all remaining reserves to stabilize the situation and hold Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad at any cost until the end of the year. At the same time, he plans to redirect attention toward attacks on Russian infrastructure, to shift focus away from the defeat narrative. Reports suggest that Syrskyi no longer controls the situation at the front and is forced to constantly extinguish fires as new crises emerge. But he lacks both the tools and resources to do so. And as promised, let's talk about the Ukrainian counterattack, though there's not much to say. They tried to carry out a breakout operation to relieve their encircled garrison in Kupiansk. They used 2 armored personnel carriers and attempted to push through the village of Moskovka, which, while marked as a Russian-controlled zone, is effectively a grey area. and rush into Kupiansk. The result? They did pass through Moskovka, but on Dolhalevska Street inside Kupiansk, their vehicles were set on fire. However, about 20 Ukrainian soldiers managed to dismount and scatter among private houses. Fighting is still ongoing as Russian troops attempt to flush them out. But seriously, what were they thinking? Did they really believe they could break the blockade with just 2 armored vehicles and 20 assault troops? That's pure nonsense. As for Kupiansk itself, there are still no major changes. As I said earlier, I personally expect the capture of Kupiansk by the end of the year. It might happen sooner, but realistically, the end of the year looks most probable. Well, that's all for the frontline situation today. Now let's move on to the political arena. Zelensky has effectively rejected Putin's demand to withdraw Ukrainian troops from the Donetsk region. "We will not give Russia anything," Zelensky declared. Let me remind you, the media reported that during his meeting with Donald Trump, Zelensky was presented with an ultimatum to withdraw the Ukrainian armed forces from the Donetsk region. Zelensky's statement that he refused to surrender the remaining parts of Donetsk is a clear signal of his intention to escalate the conflict and derail upcoming negotiations. According to the Telegram channel Legitimny, this is an attempt to suppress internal dissent and betrayal within the nationalist camp and the war party. It's a calculated move to prolong the war and negotiate from a stronger position. As Zelensky is now focused on what they call Infrastructure War 3.0, inflicting damage on Russia's oil and gas sectors to raise global energy prices, reportedly at the request of his Western sponsors. Additionally, this strategy aims at indirect economic strikes on China, the idea being to deprive Beijing of Russian gas. Apart from that, Zelensky's statements have lost any real weight, as his words no longer carry authority or credibility. Reports indicate that Trump used strong language and pressured Zelensky to transfer territories to Russia during their meeting, which, according to Reuters, left Kyiv disappointed. Trump also refused to provide Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, and even spoke about offering security guarantees not only to Kyiv, but also to Moscow. It was quite bad, one source said of the meeting. The message was clear: your country will freeze and face a major defeat if Ukraine doesn't make a deal with Russia. Reuters notes that Trump repeatedly resorted to profanity during the talks. The Friday meeting, the agency concludes, shows that Trump is once again pushing for a swift agreement, even if it comes at unpleasant terms for Kyiv. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov commented that the position of the Kyiv regime is full of contradictions and does not contribute to a peaceful settlement. He added that much preparatory work remains before the upcoming meeting between Putin and Trump. The full-scale preparation for the next Russia-United States summit has not yet begun, but it will start shortly. Moscow, Peskov said, sees this new meeting as an opportunity to discuss bilateral relations and to advance the peace process in Ukraine. He emphasized that Russia's negotiating position remains unchanged. Its forces will stop only at their current positions, and the territorial question is closed. Meanwhile, U.S. Senator J.D. Vance stated that the United States must first ensure its own military readiness before supplying Tomahawk missiles to Kyiv. Vance repeated Trump's message from the Zelensky meeting almost word for word. Trump's representative Witkover praised the recent phone conversation between Putin and Trump, saying the two leaders are actively working toward resolving the Ukrainian conflict. At the same time, Zelensky announced that Ukraine is preparing a contract to purchase 25 Patriot air defense systems. According to him, the deliveries will be spread over several years, with systems transferred gradually as they are produced. The purchase will be financed primarily through frozen Russian assets, but other funding mechanisms are also being discussed under 28 bilateral security agreements. The deal involves the U.S. defense company Raytheon, which manufactures the Patriot systems. So far, there is no information that the White House has approved the agreement. This winter, Ukraine enters the danger zone, not only because of Russian missiles, but also because of political negligence. With Ukraine suffering an acute shortage of air defense systems, the Russian Federation has shifted its tactics. Instead of massive missile waves, Russia is now carrying out pinpoint, systematic strikes on key energy hubs. The head of Ukraine's energy company Ukrenergo, Volodymyr Zychenko, confirmed this directly. They are hitting substations and thermal power plants, again and again, he said, as quoted by the Telegram channel Cartel. Winter preparations have failed, electricity is rationed, water supply is unstable, and the heating season has been postponed, though it's already too late for that. While citizens try to stay warm using generators and power banks, the authorities pretend everything is under control. But this is not a coincidence. It's a systemic collapse. Zelensky failed to oversee preparations for winter, and his team reportedly embezzled billions allocated by the West for the protection of Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Now every new Russian strike is not just a threat, it's the direct result of political irresponsibility. Winter hasn't even begun yet, but it's already clear. It will be a black winter, summarizes Cartel. The Spanish newspaper El País, citing sources within European Union institutions, called the upcoming Putin-Trump meeting in Budapest a political nightmare for the European Union. According to European officials, the summit, arranged through the mediation of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, has become a symbol of Europe's diminished role and a blow to the Union's unity. The publication notes that the meeting between Putin and Trump, held in the capital of an EU and NATO member state but without the participation of the European Union itself, is seen in Brussels as deeply humiliating. For the European establishment, the event embodies a geopolitical paradox. Two of the most powerful figures in global politics will discuss Ukraine's future on European soil, without the Europeans. El País adds that the logistics of the summit itself highlight growing tension in European capitals. Since the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, his flight path to Budapest has become a sensitive matter. He would have to either cross EU airspace or take a longer route via Turkey, Montenegro, and Serbia. However, just as he was granted special flight permission to attend the Alaska meeting with Trump, he will likely receive similar clearance for Budapest. For Hungary, Putin's arrival poses no issue. Budapest is in the process of withdrawing from the ICC's jurisdiction, and although the procedure will formally conclude only in the summer of 2026, Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó has already declared that Hungary respectfully awaits President Putin's visit, guaranteeing him safety and favorable conditions for productive negotiations. European officials admit that the summit's initiative once again came from Viktor Orbán, who since the beginning of the Ukrainian crisis has offered Budapest as a neutral venue for dialogue between Moscow and Washington. Last year, Orbán already angered the EU when he visited Moscow on what he called a peace mission. He also met with both Trump and the head of the Kiev regime, positioning Hungary as a mediator. According to El País, the very fact that the summit is being held in Budapest carries symbolic weight for Ukraine. It was here, in 1994, that the Budapest Memorandum was signed, the agreement under which Ukraine supposedly gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for guarantees of territorial integrity. Now, El País notes, in that very same city, Putin and Trump will discuss ways to end the conflict, effectively excluding the European Union from the process. Many European diplomats believe this summit could become a final diplomatic victory for the Russian president. As one of them put it, the location is no coincidence. It deepens the divisions within the European Union and plays directly into Orbán's hands as he prepares for re-election next year.